Vietnam, when they are in the final, they do not mess about. And unfortunately, Indonesia messed it up. It's all their own doing, and I don't foresee any of them being called up into the main national squad, if at all, if the real need arises. And that could force Eric Thohir to continue to pursue the Dutch heritage policy for at least a few more years to come, because lightning clearly did not strike twice for the Indonesia under-23s as they fell 0-1 to their Vietnamese counterparts in the final of the 2025 ASEAN Under-23 Championships, which is also known as the Mandiri Cup, at the Gelora Bung Karno main stadium tonight. The result allowed the Vietnamese to defend their title for the third successive occasion, while the Indonesians were still chasing for their first ASEAN Under-23 Championships since their first success in 2019 in Cambodia. Moreover, their failure to win at yet another final on home soil extended a rather unwanted record of not winning in the final at this stadium since the 1987 Southeast Asia Games, where they actually defeated Malaysia 1-0 after extra time to claim the gold medal on 20th September 1987, when the Southeast Asian Games men's football was still a full national team event. The last time they reached a final at this Gelora Bung Karno Stadium and actually won a game was actually back in the 2010 AFF Championship final second leg. It was the second leg where they defeated, once again, Malaysia 2-1. They won that battle on the 29th of December that year, but lost the battle on aggregate after being overwhelmed by 3 clear goals in the first leg in Kuala Lumpur. That said, ever since winning the 1987 Southeast Asian Games gold medal at this stadium, Indonesian national teams of various age groups have yet to succeed in winning a final at this stadium. And for this case, Indonesia actually came into this tournament as home favourites after they dominated the tournament at the group stage and showed their mental strength by coming from a goal behind to equalize, force the game all the way to penalties before defeating the Thais on penalty shootout. If they were hoping that they could do something similar against Vietnam, unfortunately this time Vietnam under-23s are a really different proposition. Coached by South Korean head coach Kim Sang-sing, who also helms the main men's national team, the Vietnamese under-23s were proven to be a hard nut to crack. And the young Garudas, who were very used to playing their swashbuckling, I wouldn't say swashbuckling, but a pretty attractive possession-based football on the ground with quick transitions in attack, they actually failed to make any headway throughout the 90 minutes, and even with some injury time and some more during that period, Indonesia clearly do not have the upper hand. And whose fault is it that led to Indonesia failing once again to win a men's football final in any age category or the senior national team at this Gelora Bung Karno Stadium? Was it a mental block of playing at such a carnivorous arena, even though it was one ground that they are very accustomed to playing, whether it's for friendly matches, World Cup or Asian Cup qualifiers, or even the ASEAN Championships, the Southeast Asia Games, and more? Or was it because of how Vietnam read through Indonesia tactics and set up the gameplay in such a way that Indonesia clearly had no answer for? Having watched through the entire final, Tanya attempts to explain why Indonesia actually blundered badly on this occasion. So, having prevailed against Thailand in a hard-fought semi-final on penalties, Indonesian head coach Gerald Vandenberg decided to stick to much of his lineup for this final. And in this process, he probably made only one change from the team that actually defeated Thailand in the semi-finals on spot kicks. On paper, when it lined up, it appeared to be a 3-4-3 formation from the Indonesians, with the attempt to seize the initiative from the get-go, trying to press, trying to play the quick build-up passing game from the back on the ground, and on occasion attempting to play direct diagonal balls to the wings in that quick transition from defense to attack. There was only one problem in that overall strategy though. The Indonesians were unfortunately very careless in the first 30 minutes, or much of the first half rather, where they were rather careless in squandering possessions in key areas on the pitch. At first it was squandering possession in midfield or making poor decision making in the other half. But as time went by, even as Indonesia gradually gained a foothold, the way the Indonesian tried to pass their way out of trouble was sort of inviting trouble. A lot of trouble rather, because Vietnam, who were playing a rather conservative 5-4-1 wing-back position, had just one clear plan. They had this very precise plan. Sit back, wait for any mistake the Indonesians make, and pounce on them as ruthlessly as possible. And that worked for the Vietnamese, who were actually wearing red as the designated home team to the T. They waited for that loose ball to come. They waited to seize the ball when the Indonesians got rather careless, especially at the back, or when they were playing the ball out from defense to midfield. And on quite a number of occasions, the Indonesians managed to get away with it after they managed to win the second ball and cleared and moved the ball away to safety. But even then, the Indonesians, the young Garudas, were very unconvincing going forward. In fact, the first clear chance they had was as early as the 5th minute, when Jens Raven, the only foreign-born player in the starting 11 for the young Garudas, he headed over after seizing a poorly headed clearance of an Indonesian corner kick at that time. And after 2 successive yellow cards in the first quarter of an hour, Indonesia, for some reason, failed to show any initiative to get more aggressive going forward, for fear of getting red cards that could have a consequential outcome in the final. Perhaps they shouldn't have worried. If they had played the possession football with greater urgency that was shown in the last 30 minutes, the way in the first 30 minutes instead, not in the last 30 minutes, but in the first half hour instead, Indonesia would not have found themselves in such a border. But instead, it was this carelessness by those young Garudas that allowed Vietnam to take advantage. And to make things even worse, for some reason, it appeared that Indonesia had thought it that perhaps they weren't that stretched before the Thailand game, but even Thailand didn't stretch them as much as the Vietnamese did. Defending from set plays, Indonesia looked at times pretty vulnerable, because once they got the first ball to clear, they didn't hoof the ball out. They didn't pass the ball out of danger, but instead they tried to make the pass within the box, and a red shirt was there to try to seize that moment. And the worrying signs were already there even as Indonesia were beginning to gain control of possession as early as the 20-something minute. Already in the 25th minute, Vietnam's number 8, let me see, Nguyen Phan Trong, he actually flicked his header just wide off a corner kick at the near post. And when he flicked the ball heading for that far corner, which went just wide, the Indonesians were clearly ball watching inside their own area. Nobody was showing any urgency to get him a little off stride, to get him to drag him out of position, but they were all caught ball watching as the midfielder just was given the time and space to flick the ball towards the intended target. For once, it went wide. Would the young Garudas be as lucky? Unfortunately, not really. No. That is despite, for quick succession, just before and after the half-hour mark, where Indonesia actually broke through the Vietnamese offside trap thrice, of which one was ruled for offside and the other two, they got the ball, they raced into the box, but they did not pose, their final product did not cause any problems for Vietnam's goalkeeper Tran Trung Kiat. So it was their failure to take advantage of that brief period where they were given the golden chance to secure victory in front of the home crowd and to claim their first international success at the Gelora Bung Karno Stadium since 1987. And in finals like these, when you do not take your chances and you do not finish them, once the other team has that one chance, they will take it, and usually in such tight occasions, one goal is always enough to settle the outcome. And that was exactly what Vietnam did for their winning goal in the 37th minute. Once again, it's a combination of carelessness and poor defending from set plays. This time is a double combination. A Vietnamese corner curl went in. The Indonesian players were trying to challenge the Vietnamese player, but for some reason they were not effective taking the ball off the Vietnamese guy, and the ball went only as far as Nguyen Con Phuong, the number 18, who just needed that one chance to drill the ball into the bottom far corner of the net, and that was to be the only goal of the game. And thereafter, after conceding that goal on the 37th minute, Indonesia did not really put much pressure thereafter. They kept to the same style, they got better at playing at the same with increased tempo as the minutes went by, but clearly became evident that there is no plan B from Gerard van der Berg until in the dying moments of normal time. He was reluctant to throw in a second striker in Hockey Chakara to partner Jens Raven, who was rather staff of service and was rather quiet in this game. And on this occasion, when Vietnam were rather at times very happy to just sit back, take the opportunity to to find another mistake from their Indonesian passing game, seize the ball, counter, maybe, and towards the end of the game try to stretch the time as long as possible. But it was quite clear after conceding the goal, Indonesia became a pale shadow of themselves. Their attacking thrust into the final third was gone for a period of time, including after halftime. And that dire situation of failing to produce chances after going behind continued early in the second half. And it was actually Vietnam who came close to making it 2-0 and the game to the good when their number 11, their number 11, Kwai Van Kang, actually sees yet another careless possession or careless passing by the Indonesians inside their own third to go forward. The only consolation for the Indonesians, that final effort was weak. It did not trouble the Indonesian goalkeeper Adrian Shah, and that allowed Indonesia to attempt to push for comeback, which sort of began from the hour mark when Kadek Ariel, the centre back, one of the three centre backs, headed straight to the Vietnamese goalkeeper Tran, following a long throw set play. All those long throws from Robbie Davis, they will prove to be a potent weapon for the remainder of the second half. But for all their potency in the throw-ins and the occasional confusion to the Vietnamese inside their own area because of those throw-ins, remember like how Pramata Ahan has done for the main national team when Shin Tae-yong was in charge? This time round though, the Vietnamese were well prepared for it in general. Apart from that one or two odd confusions inside their own area, Indonesia clearly continued to play the way they did before they conceded the goal. They step up their tempo a little, but despite making a number of passes, they were unable to make that final decisive move. They were unable to find a way to unlock a disciplined Vietnamese defense. They were unable to find holes that they could expose and exploit, save for that few minutes between the 28th to the 32nd minute when Indonesia broke through their offside trap twice. No such thing in the second half for the Indonesians. And what did Van der Berg do? He did change the players, but he did not change the formation. He did not exactly change much of the tempo either. It seemed like they were hoping that it could be second time lucky again. Like what happened in the semi-final when they fell behind at the hour mark to the Thais, only to equalize 34 minutes later. But unlike the Thais, the Vietnamese were made of much sterner stuff, thanks to the discipline and the coaching and the drills inculcated by Kim Sang-sik. And when the Vietnamese were determined to hold up as much as possible in the latter stages of the game, that's when things got a little desperate. More long throws from Robbie Davis on either side of the pitch, and only less than 5 minutes before the end of regulation time was Hoki Chakra thrown in a way to try to bolster into a two-pronged attack alongside Jens Raven for the equalizer and possibly extra time. That is not very smart play actually, especially when you're trailing and you know that the Vietnamese are trying to hold out as long as possible to win by 1-0, which was the final result. And what happened was, Van der Berg was, I wouldn't know whether he was devoid of ideas or he was stubborn to what he had inculcated in the young Garudas in what was supposed to be a new style of play that was supposed to be set from the senior downwards. Even with a majority of the local players in the starting 11 and in the squad as well. And yet, despite making those changes after the half-hour mark, it was still clear that Vietnam were holding Indonesia at bay, even making fouls outside the box and conceding potential free kick situations. The clear part is the Vietnamese probably knew that the Indonesians were not the best free kick takers in Southeast Asia, or rather at least in the under-23 level. They knew that the Indonesians might be a bit desperate to try to fight a way through. They would give enough to force an attack, but the Vietnamese were not going to allow the Indonesians to burst through and burst through their backline or even get past their goalkeeper, whether it's physical or through the shot. And it was pretty clear that despite having more possession, more attack, more forays forward, more long throws forward, more free kicks, more throw-ins. There was no plan B at all. There was no plan B, there was no plan C, there was not even a plan D by Van der Berg. It was like Indonesia kept playing the same way. They found no answer to Vietnam's Iron War. And towards the end, not even a twin-prong attack was able to force a concrete shot, to force a save of the goalkeeper, apart from the injury time drama where the Indonesian assistant coach was given a straight rate for trying to intervene in the Vietnamese bench. Probably the last thing they needed, but in spite of the play acting and all that, it's quite clear that the local bonds, I think for the under 23s, despite some of them being kept at the national team level during the 2024 ASEAN Championships by Shin Tae-yong at the full senior level, they were unable to find a solution. And that inability to find a solution, the slow response to conceding the goal, and also perhaps the coach stubbornness in insisting that the Indonesians play a certain way, which you would have wished that the way Indonesia had passed and won possession fairly, instead of resorting to those physical early games. It could have made a difference if they have done that from the start, if they had done that with greater urgency, or if they have found a way that maybe Vietnam were being defensive, to try a way to draw them, to quietly allow them into attack, in spite of Kim Sang-sik's tactics and tactical solutions or plans. But Van der Berg and his coaching staff had none of that. The players on the pitch had none of that problem-solving passes or solutions on the pitch. And that was why, towards the end, Vietnam held out really well to prevent another serious Indonesian shot from threatening their goal. The late free kick was the closest they got in the 85th minute by Akan Fikri. But that was as close as it gets, because he had a golden chance to score for a free kick. He sent it well over. And that was as close. No shot inside the box after conceding the goal. No shots test the Vietnamese goalkeeper after Vietnam took the lead. Not at all. And when you do not try to shoot or score, even in those desperate situations, you do not win games. It doesn't matter how much possession or how much beautiful play there is. Yes, it's good to see, but when it comes to occasions like this where a single goal does make a difference, the young Garudas and Van der Berg and his entire coaching staff, all of them were found totally wanting. And what were the consequences as a result of this defeat, which was seen in front of 35,000, including the PSSI president Eric Thohir? I think Jens Raven may still be called up, even though he's only 20 years old, to be that replacement to the injured Ole Robeni. But among those in the under 23 squad who failed at the final hurdle, apart from Jens Raven, who was still the top scorer of the tournament with 7 goals, of which 6 of those goals came against Brunei, it would be very hard, it would be a very huge ask for Raven to step into Romani's shoe, because after searching so long for an effective striker, where Romani came in to score 3 goals in 4 international appearances, Romani was injured in a pre-season friendly for Oxford United in Indonesia, ironically, that rules him out for the October 4th round Repechage World Cup qualifying, for which Indonesia are going to be in Saudi Arabia, where they are paired with the hosts and, if I'm not wrong, Iraq. So it is a tough one, a very tough situation, but because of the players' lack of adaptability, I don't really foresee, apart from Jens Raven and perhaps Muhammad Ferrari or Kadek Ariel, I really don't foresee anybody else to be from this under 23 squad to be called up by Patrick Kluivert when the real business comes, or even in September friendlies in the next FIFA international window. This is how bad the situation is, and I think that was also the real reason why Eric Thohir had invested so much in those foreign-born players with Indonesian heritage over the years, because these guys would instantly raise the level of play that Vandenberg would also have wanted in those young Garudas, especially the local born. But the young Garudas could only grasp it in patches, not in total consistency as Vandenberg would have liked. And obviously, given at the age where much of the football education would have been consolidated, it is also pretty clear that there were limitations in which these young local-born Indonesians could really do when the crunch came. The football will look beautiful against very weak teams in Southeast Asia and even at times in Asia, but when real challenges in the region like Vietnam and Thailand came along, very few passed this test. True, Thailand are getting mentally weaker at various age group levels in the men's national team. But Vietnam, when they are in the final, they do not mess about. And unfortunately, Indonesia messed it up. I mean, it's all their own doing, and I don't foresee any of them being called up into the main national squad, if at all, if the real need arises. And that could force Eric Thohir to continue to pursue the Dutch heritage policy for at least a few more years to come, because this crop of under 23 players who are also supposed to form the core to defend the Southeast Asian Games gold medal in Thailand later at the end of this year, as much as it's not the biggest thing in the grander scheme of major tournaments in football in the region, but losing a final, especially when they plan it so much to have a big football bash all the way into the final, which they reach, but only to miss out the big prize. There are plenty of things to learn ahead, and perhaps food for Vandenberg and his coaching staff to ponder over in the next few months before the young Garudas embark on their mission to defend their gold medal in the under 23 men's football tournament in the SEA Games in Thailand this December. Otherwise, it is very difficult to see many of them progress into the main national team in a few years' time. Perhaps only 3 or 4 for the September window, and even in October. But to be honest, I think the main national team players who are already in the squad, they should feel safe that their places are not going to be severely threatened.